The Kremlin has issued a readout of a call between Presidents Cyril Ramaphosa and Vladimir Putin a day after the United States accused Pretoria of providing weapons and ammunition to the Russian army. South Africa has since indicated that arms to Russia were not sanctioned or approved by the National Convention Arms Control Committee and launched an investigation into the allegation levelled by Washington's envoy to the country. As shown by a Bryce piece reports, Moscow says the call with South Africa's head of state was at the request of Pretoria.
Kremlin readout comes as U.S. Ambassador to South Africa Reuben Brigety was summoned by the Department of International Relations to explain his comments to local media yesterday, in which he was emphatic that weapons and ammunition transfers had taken place. Moscow says they discussed topical issues of the strategic partnership between the two countries, as both expressed the need for further activation of mutually beneficial ties in various fields. They noted the importance of continuing close coordination ahead of the second Russia-Africa summit to be held in St. Petersburg in July and the BRICS summit to be hosted in Johannesburg in August, while also discussing issues of global food security and the need for grain and fertilizer by African states in particular. The Kremlin also indicated that it supported the idea expressed by President Ramaphosa for the participation of a group of African leaders in discussing the prospects of resolving the conflict in Ukraine, adding that President Putin outlined his fundamental assessments of the destructive line of the Ukrainian government and its patrons, and that Russia had never refused to work on the diplomatic track. The United States earlier expressed its concerns.
We remain committed to our affirmative agenda of our bilateral relationship with South Africa, one that is focused on the priorities the two governments share, priorities that the recent high-level delegation to Washington discussed. These include issues of global peace and security, further growing the robust trade relationship, working together on a shared health agenda, finding ways in which we, the United States, can be helpful to South Africa's energy challenges through a just transition of renewable sources of energy, as well as continued partnerships on work as it relates to addressing climate change. That being said, Sean, as we have previously said, the U.S. Has serious concerns about the docking of a sanctioned Russian cargo vessel at a South African naval port in December of last year. And as good partners do, we have raised those concerns directly with multiple South African officials.
The Department of International Relations also pointed to an expected call between Minister Naledi Pandor and her U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken later Friday. A senior U.S. official told SABC News on Thursday that it would be wise for countries to step back from any kind of engagement with the Russian military, but would not be drawn on whether any possible punitive measures were being considered. Washington continues to take a dim view of countries supporting Russia's aggression in Ukraine, saying it would continue to engage on the importance of upholding the UN Charter. Reuben Brigety, SABC News, New York.
The Department of International Relations and Cooperation has demarched the United States ambassador to South Africa, Reuben Brigety, and expressed the South African government's utter displeasure with his conduct in statements made yesterday, alleging that South Africa sold weapons to Russia. Dirco finds this behavior by the U.S. ambassador to South Africa puzzling and at odds with the mutually beneficial and cordial relationship that exists between the United States of America and South Africa.
The Department of International Relations and Cooperation has summoned the United States ambassador to South Africa and expressed the South African government's utter displeasure with his conduct and statements made yesterday, alleging that South Africa sold weapons to Russia. The department finds this behavior by the United States ambassador to South Africa puzzling and at odds with the mutually beneficial and cordial relationship that exists between the United States of America and South Africa. Following today's meeting, Ambassador Reuben Brigety admitted that he crossed the line and apologized unreservedly to the government and people of South Africa. South Africa is known globally for having one of the most stringent processes when selling arms to other countries. The process is managed by the National Convention Arms Control Committee, which was created through an Act of Parliament, the National Conventional Arms Control Act 41 of 2002, and the Constitution. Dirco welcomes the decision by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa to appoint an independent inquiry to be chaired by a retired judge to look into the allegations made by the U.S. Ambassador to South Africa. This process will allow for facts to be established and for role players to be identified. Anyone found to have broken the law will face severe consequences. South Africa calls on the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria to use established diplomatic channels of communication to convey any concerns or to seek clarity on any misunderstandings that may arise in the management of the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
And now to discuss this a bit more further, we are joined by Wits University's Professor of International Relations, John Stremlau, and he joins us via our Zoom link. John, thank you so much for joining us here on the Late Edition. Perhaps let's start with the latest coming out from the International Relations Department. They've said that they've had a meeting now with the Minister for Dirco as well as Reuben Brigety, and we now know that he has sent out an apology to the country. What is the latest and what is your reaction to that communication we have now seen with the Department of International Relations?
Well, it's been quite a week, and the work that Ambassador Brigety has done in terms of the frustration that he must have felt since the December 8 Lady R docked in Simonstown, and there's been no accountability on that at all, as far as I can tell, even though there was extensive press coverage of the ship and what was going on, even though we didn't know what was in the boxes. There were credible press reports on that, and I suspect the frustration of the U.S. It was that here South Africa was claiming to be non-aligned, and not only did it have the military operations, but it also had the docking of the Lady R, and then the recent flight to Waterkloof Air Base of a sanctioned civilian aircraft. Mind you, the suffering of the Ukrainian people, no one in South Africa or any place else denies that. It's just terrible. And it was an aggression by the Russians against a sovereign state. So the frustration that the U.S. has is understandable. But at the same time, I think there is a desire to see the relationship between South Africa and the United States continue, because it's a very rich relationship and beneficial to both countries.
Yes, and Professor, one would also ask, when we look at the allegations which have come out, in particular to the Lady R, and we look at the relationship between the two countries, these allegations, what sort of impact do they have on the relationship or the relations between these two countries?
The short answer is we don't know yet, because there are a number of programs that I think have had enduring value to both South Africa and to some extent the United States, but they've been concessional, such as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is up for renewal in 2025, and obviously the big PEPFAR program. Now, at a time in 2003 when the PEPFAR was launched, the South African government rightly took, in my view, the George W. Bush administration to task for invading Iraq and under the pretense of weapons of mass destruction, which President Mbeki, from his own intelligence, knew probably didn't exist. And yet, on this case, the South Africans have taken a very different position, claiming non-alignment, but at the same time having all of these military dealings with Russia and being very reluctant to condemn Russia and for intervening in a sovereign equal state, a neighbor that wasn't bothering anybody.
And when we look and zoom into South Africa in particular, what risks are there for the country, especially because of the allegations coming out of the country and looking at its relations with the United States? What risks are there going, further in terms of this relationship?
Last time I looked, the rand was at 1933, and I've never seen it that weak. And so, at a time when we're overcoming the terrible effects of corruption and state capture, exemplified by the load shed problem that is impinging on all sorts of businesses, including the 600 U.S. corporations that are working here in South Africa and have try to contribute to the economic development and well-being of the country while also doing good business. And they are under enormous stress, as everyone is in this country. And it is a very difficult time for the country. And why is it complicating its dealings with the United States over what is a classic a big power move by a colonial power of Russia to recolonize Ukraine, and it doesn't make sense, but it's the way it is, and so you're seeing people turn themselves inside out, and the rest of us are paying the price of inflation and of a failure to come to terms with the state capture problem.
Many are even asking, why didn't these two countries use its own diplomatic channels to address this, and this being put on the doorstep of the ambassador here in South Africa. Do you think that there's still time and room, to resolve or address this through diplomatic channels, or is it too late?
No, it's never too late for diplomatic channels to be rekindled, but at the same time, the frustration of having had this visit by the Lady R back in December and no accountability for it, apparently, there was no accounting. I have to assume, but I don't know, I have to assume that there have been lots of communications back and forth between Washington and South Africa over the concerns that America has been very vocal on, and Reuben Brigety had went public with those concerns in a Sunday Times opinion piece, which recalled his deep affection for the country and his desire to be a good ambassador, but at the same time, the ANC, of which I'm a member, nevertheless has produced these position papers around the last party Congress that don't mention PEPFAR, don't mention AGOA, and really indict the United States for being a behemoth and as though there's no difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I mean, good grief! You have a situation where if Trump had gotten a second term, the whole Ukraine war would look very different because he was a good friend of Vladimir Putin.
All right, then. Thank you very much indeed. That is Professor John Stremlau.